Professional wrestling has long been an industry that predicates itself on some level of acting skill, whether it's selling, mannerisms, reactions, promos, or interactions with others. With all of that taken into consideration, one would have to consider William Regal one of the all-time greatest actors in wrestling's annals. Whether as subtle as a bemused sneer or a satisfied grin, or something more involved like being the butt of a humorous situation, or requiring volcanic emotion in the face of conflict, King William is a walking masterclass in telling a story, sometimes without him even having to utter a single word. I'm Jack from Cultaholic.com, and this is the captivating career of William Regal. Regal began his career as a 15-year-old in Blackpool, where he trained to become a shooter at a wrestling challenge booth operated by Bobby Barron. Park attendees would have to wrestle Regal for a certain length of time in order to try and win a cash prize, only to usually be tortured into submission. By 1987, the man known as Steve Regal was wrestling for All-Star Wrestling throughout the United Kingdom, where he formed the tag team The Golden Boys along with Robbie Brookside. In the couple of years that Regal wrestled for All-Star, he worked with noted veterans such as Giant Haystacks, Drew McDonald, and Marty Jones, among others. By the early 90s, Regal began wrestling for the Welsh promotion Reslo, as well as Germany-based Foro, which employed a round system. Regal remained with Voro throughout 1991, during which time he had brushes with the two major American promotions. During WWE's 1991 European Rampage tour, Regal wrestled in a six-man dark match with partners Dave Taylor and Tony Sinclair, and worked another dark match at October's Battle Royal at Albert Hall, defeating Brian Maxine. Later that month, he wrestled 6 matches on a WCW tour of the UK and Ireland, scoring wins over Terry Taylor and Jimmy Jam Garvin along the way. In '92, Regal wrestled extensively for the Catch Wrestling Association in Germany, where he matched up with veterans like Fit Finlay and Rip Rogers, as well as a 24-year-old Wild Carl Wallace, the man known today as PCO. At the time Regal was making his money with Catch, he had reached out to WCW shot caller Bill Watts, inquiring about a position in the company. In January '93, Regal debuted proper with WCW, working as a babyface and defeating Bob Cook at a Saturday night taping. In the months ahead, Regal remained tucked in the undercard as a rather basic good guy, touring the house show scene in matches with Max Payne and a young Chris Benoit. Come June of that year, Regal reconfigured himself as a villain, calling himself Lord Steven Regal, claiming to be a descendant of William the Conqueror. Managed by the umbrella-toting Sir William, who was veteran wrestler Bill Dundee, and entering to a trumpet-filled procession, Regal defeated Eric Watts at the Beach Blast pay-per-view and continued to pick up wins on TV, going over on Marcus Bagwell, Brad Armstrong, and many others. His lordship then entered into a rivalry with television champion Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, going on to defeat him for the belt at Fall Brawl that September after Sir William smashed his umbrella over Steamboat's head to set up the pinfall. Regal defended the title against a long list of challengers, from Steamboat to Davey Boy Smith to Arn Anderson, oftentimes going to time limit draws as a way of enhancing his foes without actually dropping the gold. But he did drop the belt to semi-active Larry Zbyszko in May 1994 after reigning for 225 days. Shortly after, he actually scored a win over WCW World Champion Ric Flair during a best-of-5 Marquess of Queensberry challenge for the belt. Regal regained the TV title from Zbyszko at the June '94 Clash of the Champions, then went on to retain the gold over Johnny B. Bad at Bash at the Beach before losing a curious non-title bout to Antonio Inoki at the August 1994 Clash. Regal lost the title to Johnny B. Bad at the '94 Fall Brawl before heading off to New Japan to compete in the Super Grade Tag League alongside partner Mike Enos. Back in WCW, Regal was on the verge of forming an upper-crust duo with supposed Frenchman Jean-Paul Levesque, who quickly left for WWE to become Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Instead, Regal turned world-class tag wrestler and noted Alabama native Bobby Eaton into a makeshift Englishman, culturing him in a series of humorous vignettes as the two became known as the Blue Bloods. They fell short in tag team title bids against the Nasty Boys and Harlem Heat during the remainder of 1995. Come '96, Regal found himself embroiled in a heated feud with the Belfast bruiser Fit Finlay. The two had a hellaciously hard-hitting match at Uncensored that year, followed by Regal beating Finlay in a parking lot brawl the following month. That August, Regal regained the TV title by beating Lex Luger on WCW Saturday Night, holding it for 6 months before dropping it to Prince Ikea. He held it one more time in mid-97, winning it from and losing it back to Ultimo Dragon. In February 98, he had a rather infamous match on Nitro with the unsinkable Goldberg, in which Regal bewildered the man booked to be a wrecking machine by performing shoot-style techniques. And not long after, Regal was gone from WCW after a 5-year run. He turned up in WWE that June, originally performing in his usual aristocratic guise, but was eventually recast rather bizarrely as a hard hat-wearing outdoor labourer known as the real man's man, Steven Regal. Though he did take part in a Survivor Series tournament to crown a new world champion, going to a non-finish with X-Pac, Regal soon after checked into rehab to deal with his ongoing addiction to pain medication. Regal left WWE in early 99 and resurfaced in WCW that June, oftentimes teaming with Finlay, Dave Taylor, and Chris Adams in different combinations. But by February 2000, however, Regal was once again gone from the company after dropping a loser leaves match to Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Seemingly past his glory days, Regal turned heads at the 3rd annual Brian Pillman Memorial Show in a fine technical clash with Chris Benoit. That match played a big role in getting Regal a job with WWE once more, where that fall, he was reborn as William Regal. Initially, Regal preached class and etiquette to a disinterested Attitude Era crowd in a series of segments before taking to the ring once more. Faith in a now cleaned up Regal was so high that less than a month after his return, he defeated Al Snow to win the European title, after taking exception to Snow's playful appropriation of European countries through costumes and props. After a brief title switcheroo with Crash Holly, Regal lost the belt a second time to Test in early 2001, but a greater reward remained: the WWE Commissionership. Regal defeated Al Snow to win the vacated office and worked to screw over every babyface he could, namely IC champion Chris Jericho. In a match partially built to by Jericho urinating into Regal's tea, the two kicked off the acclaimed WrestleMania X7, where Regal fell short in an accelerated title bout. Regal gained revenge on a now beltless Jericho at Backlash in a silly Duchess of Queensberry rules match, and soon after received what every on-screen character should have: a wickedly cool sidekick, in this case, Tajiri. Throughout the WCW ECW invasion, the typically treacherous Regal backed WWE, but he showed his vile colours by costing Kurt Angle the WWE title in a match against Steve Austin, this signalling his defection. When the Alliance was vanquished at Survivor Series, Regal had to literally kiss ass to get his WWE job back, in the only example of that gag ever being even slightly amusing. But Regal was back to being a serious heel again, debuting theme music fitting for a James Bond villain. He defeated Edge for the IC title at the Royal Rumble with the aid of Brass Knuckles, before boasting about his power of the punch in the aftermath. As champion, Regal once again opened WrestleMania, losing the IC title to Rob Van Dam before 68,000 fans at Toronto's Skydome. But Regal wasn't without gold for long, defeating DDP to win his old European title back 2 nights later at the SmackDown tapings. He also captured the Hardcore title a few times in this period, but his focus was the European title, which he dropped to Spike Dudley in a big upset on Monday Night Raw. Regal regained it weeks later and proved to be one of the final champions, losing it to Jeff Hardy weeks before it was absorbed into the IC title's lineage. Not long after, he briefly joined the Un-American stable just before its dissolution 4 weeks later. From there, Regal partnered up with Lance Storm, and in early 2003, the pair defeated Booker T and Goldust to win Raw's World Tag Team titles. But sadly, the reign was one that Regal would probably rather want to forget, after he was knocked out during a title defense against RVD and Kane at No Way Out, and then was sidelined with life-threatening heart defects, including a parasite contracted during a WWE tour of India, as well as an unsynchronized heartbeat. Unfortunately, Regal missed over a year of action while he recovered, which included months of anti-blood clot treatments, as well as putting on an additional 40 pounds of weight. Weeks after WrestleMania 20 in 2004, Regal reappeared on WWE programming and was put into a very curious angle, acting as the guardian of Eric Bischoff's unique nephew, Eugene. Regal's understated annoyance and Eugene's playful exuberance, to be fair, did make for a unique contrast, and it marked the first time in a couple of years that Regal got to show off his comedic chops. When Regal was unable to thrash Eugene in a training session, instead finding himself out-wrestled by this apparent savant, he began sympathizing with the man, and soon after, subtly protecting him. When Triple H and Evolution began playing with Eugene's emotions, Regal began interfering more and more as a heroic character. Regal crystallized his face turn by cutting what was probably the promo of his life on Triple H, caustically vowing to destroy him in a match if Helmsley accepted his challenge. Later in 2004, Regal and Eugene won Raw's tag team titles by defeating La Resistance, a reign that was sadly compromised by Eugene suffering a knee injury in 2005. After La Resistance got the titles back, Regal renewed his old partnership with Tajiri, and the two regained the titles at a Raw taping in Saitama, Japan that February. The reign lasted for 3 months before coming to an end in a tag team turmoil match at Backlash. Shortly after, Regal was shuffled over to SmackDown as part of a massive talent trade, and for for a while, he was mostly invisible outside of some genuinely awesome matches on Velocity against Chris Benoit. He did turn heel once more in short order, double-crossing Scotty 2 Hotty in a tag team match and then forming a new partnership with protege Paul Burchill. Together they defeated Paul London and Brian Kendrick on the No Mercy pre-show, but momentum didn't last beyond that. The two were trounced in a handicap match at Armageddon against Bobby Lashley, and their collaboration fell apart shortly after, especially once Burchill expressed his desires to be a pirate. Oh yes, who could forget buxom wench William Regal? Regal found better usage as the official heralder of King Booker, joining Booker T's court alongside fellow WCW alums Sharmell and Fit Finlay, though Regal and Finlay occasionally were pitted as foes, as would be expected, over Finlay's United States title. Regal then got sidetracked by an odd feud with dress-wearing Vito, but later in the year was teamed once more with longtime friend Dave Taylor. The veteran duo failed to win the SmackDown Tag Team titles in repeated challenges against London and Kendrick, and as 2007 began to wear on, Regal was getting lost deeper and deeper in the shuffle once more. In June 2007, Regal returned to Raw as part of the supplemental draft, and within 2 months, he was back in the role he was born to play, the conniving showrunner, after winning a battle royal that made him Raw's general manager. For some reason, Regal alternated between his usual acts of villainy with instituting game show segments into Raw, so it was kind of hard to tell where Regal was coming from motivation-wise. He worked to try and cost Triple H's spot in the 2008 Royal Rumble, which earned Regal a hearty beating in a First Blood match during a special Raw Roulette broadcast. In April 2008, on the eve of his 40th birthday, Regal won the King of the Ring tournament, defeating Hornswoggle, Finlay, and CM Punk all via submission in a curiously staggered bracket that benefited Regal. He tried to dictate the program by ordering the lights to be turned out whenever he felt he wasn't being respected. Soon after, he ran afoul of Mr. Kennedy, who forced him off Raw in a loser leaves town match, which was held due to Regal failing a wellness test in real life. But he returned to Raw late in July without his GM title or his kingship to fall back on. He then won a brief feud with Jamie Noble, in which he acquired Layla as a romantic interest. That November in Manchester, Regal regained the IC title he'd last held 6.5 years earlier by defeating Santino Marella in just 31 seconds. The reign lasted a little more than 2 months, ending just before the 2009 Royal Rumble when CM Punk defeated him in a no DQ match on Raw. In June, Regal was traded to ECW, where he soon formed the Ruthless Roundtable alongside Vladimir Kozlov and Ezekiel Jackson, who acted as his heavies. He went on to lose an ECW title match to Christian, the champion, at SummerSlam in just 7 seconds, still wearing his robe when he was kill-switched. He'd then lose a much longer rematch to Christian at Breaking Point 3 weeks later, and a 23-minute battle for the title in Sheffield that November. Regal returned to Raw after the ECW brand ended, his days as a featured player inside the ring seemingly over, but he did mentor Skip Sheffield, or Ryback, miscast as a cowboy, on the first season of NXT. He became further involved with the brand as an announcer and later assumed commentary duties for Florida Championship Wrestling. There he entered into an intense and highly cerebral feud with Dean Ambrose, where Regal won the first round, causing Ambrose to obsess over a rematch. After goading Regal for months on end, the Englishman battled Ambrose in one of FCW's final matches, ending in a no contest when Regal's ear began to bleed. In a gesture of respect for Ambrose's viciousness, he allowed Dean to drill him with a knee trembler, leaving him laid out. It seemed as though the attack would mark the end of Regal's in-ring career, but there were still matches to be had. He worked mostly in untelevised matches on the main brand from there, with the likes of Santino Marella, Wade Barrett, and Michael McGillicuddy into 2013. His last televised main roster matches came against Fandango on Raw that April in London, and against Cesaro 2 months later in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In fact, Cesaro is the man presumed to be Regal's final in-ring opponent, defeating him in a 21-minute match at an NXT taping in November 2013, which aired on Christmas Day. A little more than 3 years later, Regal confirmed that he was indeed retired as a wrestler. In July 2014, Regal moved from the NXT commentary desk into the GM position, a role that he's held ever since. He periodically appears on camera in order to make announcements or to add realism and attempted levity to an out-of-control situation, but mostly he's hands-off. His real-life positions are even more time-consuming, as Regal serves as WWE's Director of Talent Development and Head of Global Recruiting, effective in February 2018. One of his most recent appearances on main roster WWE programming was to be acknowledged among a roll call of past general managers. If you're of a certain age, Regal might be one of those wrestlers that you never appreciated when you were younger, but as you began to value subtlety and craftsmanship, he may well have even become one of your favourites. He was a character actor with a leading man's chops, and a masterful technician and ring general who took his work deathly seriously, but also understood the value of being a comic patsy at times. William Regal is the epitome of the pro's pro, a man who cherishes the sport and its rich history adding further integrity to its totality, while just as easily enriching every single segment he's in, no matter how silly or outlandish. Few wrestlers have ever unassumingly brought more to the table than William Regal, and the older we get, the more we all understand that. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.